Welcome, welcome, welcome. I would like to welcome you to episode 552 of the Unpopular Podcast. This is the man, the myth, the legend, Jalen Hunter. Here at the Unpopular Podcast, not really asked to agree with me and ask you to hear me out. Let me first say Happy New Year. I had a lot going on from Christmas to now, which is why this is the first episode we're getting in a week. So I appreciate you guys sticking in with me. But Happy New Year. I hope that everything that you asked for this year comes to you. I hope everything that you pray for, a lot of blessings come your way. I hope that 2026 is a great year for all of us. But to start this episode, I want to go back a year. I was vehement and I was very upset when I looked at the format of the college football playoffs. And some of it, obviously, me being an Oregon fan, some of it was because I was an Oregon fan and I saw us lose, but a lot of it was because I didn't. The question that you had to ask yourself was, what is more important, momentum or rest? That is the age-old question, and that's the question that the college football playoffs wrestle with. What is more important? Or what is more of a, let's say, what's more of a incentive? What's more of a reward? Momentum or rest? Last year, looking more specifically to Oregon, Oregon was the best team, the only undefeated team in the college football playoffs. They beat Penn State in the Big Ten championship, and their reward was they got to wait like 2 to 3 weeks, not play anybody. And the first game that they played in the college football playoffs, I believe it was the quarterfinals, was the hottest team and the team that ultimately won the national championship in Ohio State. And I said, how is that a reward? How is the fact that you win, you go undefeated, you win your conference championship, you are the best team in the college football playoffs. You're the best team in college football all year, and your reward is off of almost a month of rest. You play the hottest team in college football on a neutral site. I didn't find that to be. And you saw what happened. Oregon pretty much got their doors blown off because they hadn't played in like 3 weeks. As loud as I was for Oregon, I can't be biased to just that situation because, again, last year, every single quarterfinalist that was a higher seed that got the reward of rest lost. And up until this, oh, and actually, if you look at this year, only one team won that was able to get rest, and we'll talk about them shortly. I understand why the format is what it is. I get that. I understand you want to give your top seeds buys. I get it. You don't want them to have to, play 4 games to essentially win a national championship because they have essentially proven to be one of the best teams in the nation. They should only have to play 3 games. I get the mindset. But one thing that is uber important in college football, in college sports, in sports in general is momentum. And you can't get any momentum sitting, resting, chilling. Now, I don't know how you fix this, but there should be no reason that in 2 years, the seeds that went into the quarterfinals with a bye, that means the top 4 seeds, as we currently speak, I think they're 1 and what, 4? 1-9, 1-10, maybe. That shows you all you need to know right there. And as funny as it is, we'll talk about very briefly. We'll talk about every quarterfinal game we have. You saw the rest versus rust, in my opinion, more with the Miami Ohio State game. So the Ohio State that benefited essentially from momentum and playing a team that was resting last year against Oregon essentially dealt the same fate a year the next year this year against Miami. Now, let me give credit to Miami. Miami going into this is probably one of the hottest teams in college football. I think the frustration that a lot of people had with Miami was they were underachieving majority of the year. They were losing to teams that they shouldn't have lost to. They were in close games. Now they were destroying people from time to time, but they would lose games that you're like, how the hell did you lose that game? But before the season and when they did the preseason rankings and everything, Miami was ranked high, not just because that they're riddled with transfers, but they had one of the best defenses on paper going into the college football season. And probably for the last, I'll say, 6, 7 games, we're seeing the Miami that was project a lot of people projected to win the national championship this year. Let's not get it twisted. Miami, as good as they look, right now they are being carried by their defense. Not saying their offense is trash, but when you look at their game against Texas A&M, and even when you look at their game against Ohio State, most of it was because of the defense. They only scored 10 points against Texas Tech or Texas A&M, and that was a late rushing touchdown after a turnover, if I'm not mistaken, by Texas A&M. And you saw what happened. I'll say Miami's defense just suffocated Ohio State's offense. It suffocated Julian saying they couldn't get it. They couldn't get anything done in the run game. While yes, Jeremiah Smith was pretty much the saving grace for this Ohio State team in the game, they couldn't do anything. Miami is playing like the team that a lot of people projected to at least compete for a national championship and see at the beginning of the season. I'm still not sold on if Carson Beck can lead this team because we've seen he's this offense hasn't been great. But when you right now, Miami, I don't think there is a better unit. And this is coming from an Oregon fan, which we'll talk about shortly. I don't think there's a better unit right now in football. And that's including Indiana. There is not a better unit in football right now than the Miami defense. They and it's very interesting. And this is the best case scenario, not just for them, but for the committee, for the ACC. Remember, Miami was one of those teams that wasn't supposed to be in the. People were like, "Oh, how did Miami make it?" and uh, not Notre Dame or not Texas. This Miami is proving why the committee made the right decision. Now you can argue about Tulane and JMU, but for Miami, that was the right call. And they're right now, I don't think there's a unit in football that's playing better than their defense. Now let's talk about Ohio State for a second because I think that it's important to highlight this. Ohio State undoubtedly was one of the best teams in college football all year. In my opinion, they had one of, if not the best, wide receiver in football in Jeremiah Smith. They had the best defensive player in football in Caleb Downs. They were they had a bunch of transfers, a bunch of returning players. Ohio State was unequivocally one of the best teams in college football all year. But let me explain to you why I think this entire season led up to them essentially losing to Miami. Now, I think a lot of it was rest and rust. A lot of it was they were sitting idle after, playing in the Big Ten championship. And you went up against, again, in my opinion, one of the hottest units, if not the hottest unit in football, and that is Miami's defense. I think anybody would struggle against Miami's defense on that day. Was the Cotton Bowl in the Cotton Bowl? But this is why a huge emphasis, especially this year, is strength of schedule. Not just because, seeding and if you should be in the playoffs or not, but are you tested? Are you are you battle tested for when you play those upper echelon teams? Are you one of those teams that you've gone through a gauntlet? That's a lot why a lot, and we'll talk about it shortly, but that's why a lot of people was bashing Oregon. They were like, "Yo, who have you played this year to justify being such a high stature?" When you look at Ohio State's schedule, they played three, one, four. I'm sorry. They played four ranked opponents this year. They played Texas the first game. They played Illinois. They played Michigan, and they played Indiana. They almost lost to Texas. Indiana, okay. Or Illinois, I'm sorry. Illinois, okay. Michigan, that's the rivalry game. And they lost to Indiana in the Big Ten championship. I know we talk about Notre Dame. I know Oregon got talked about a lot. Strength of schedule is important, not just for seeding, but will you be able to handle a top tier team? And I think the thing that a lot of people gave Ohio State the benefit of the doubt with was, oh, they're coming off a national championship. They just won a national championship. Ryan Day and a lot of this team are national champions. Okay, that's last year. What about this year? This year you play Grambling, okay. You play Ohio, okay. You play Washington, okay. You play Minnesota, okay. You play Wisconsin, okay. You play Penn State, who a lot of people thought that was going to be a good game, but turns out Penn State had a really bad season. Okay, you play Purdue, okay. You played UCLA, Rutgers. Mind you, even the ranked teams, Texas didn't make the playoffs. Illinois didn't make the playoffs. Michigan didn't make the playoffs. The only team that they played that made the playoffs just so happens to be the only team that they lost to, and that was Indiana in the Big Ten championship. Scheduling is important. And I think the two things that did Ohio State in this year was scheduling Because when you look at they don't play anybody. They only played one team that made the college football playoffs. One, and that just so happened to be the one team that they lost to. And they were sitting, and you played against one of the hottest teams in college football, especially the one of the hottest units in the defense. Do I think that if they played again, if they played on a neutral site, or if they played two, three more times, do I think Ohio State would beat Miami? Maybe. But I think that another thing that scheduling does throughout the years is it shows you just who you are. And there's a reason why a lot of people, even throughout the season, had questions about Julian Sand. I know he was a finals or Heisman finalist, but a lot of people had questions about him. Like, how would he fare when the pressure was dialed up? Well, he didn't play too well. Congratulations to Miami for beating Ohio State in the was it Cotton Bowl 24-14. To be honest with you, I'm obviously when you see the ranking, when you see two going against 10, there's a bit of a shock there. But if you really look at how things were built, how both of these teams were built, how both of these teams were projected going into the season, how both of the schedules laid out, it's not shocking or shouldn't be shocking that Ohio State lost to Miami. So, speaking of shocking, let's go over to the Sugar Bowl. And I think this was by far the best quarterfinals game we had in the last 2 years. And that is Ole Miss beating Georgia 39-34. Now, let's not get it twisted. The only question that we had, and the only reason why a lot of people, including myself, doubted Ole Miss going into the playoffs is because of the whole Lane Kiffin situation. When you don't have the person that has led you to the playoffs the whole time, when you don't have your coach, it's hard to really believe that you have a shot. But this game lived up to everything that you'd hope for. An SEC champion, FCC matchup. You had Trinidad Cabal. He played incredible. Stockton played cool. Like when you're trying to draw up a quarterfinal game, this is what you want. You have controversy. I don't know how in God's name, which I'm so happy that Ole Miss won. Not just I don't have any beef against Georgia, but I'm so happy that Ole Miss won because if you how you have two refs on the side, and how do you blatantly miss a face mask? It was one of the worst face masks that you could be a non-call in face mask history. And they were just like, "Oh, I didn't see that." What? But I digress. Old Miss overall beat Georgia 39-34, and I don't want it to get confused, and I don't want it to get lost that Old Miss does not have their coach. Shout out to the interim head coach right now, who was part of Lane Kiffin's coaching staff that's coaching them now, but Lane Kiffin's not there, and they're doing this. You beat one of the best coaches in college football in Kirby Smart. Did you see once Ohio State lost how the heavy favorite to or the two favorites to win it all went to Indiana and Georgia? and understandably so. It Shout out to Ole Miss, man. I can't express enough how they're not supposed to be here. Mind you, their running back Lacey, who was essentially their best offensive player, he only had 22 carries for 98 yards and two touchdowns. Like this was a back and forth of like this was the best type of game that you wanted to see. And the thing about it, and this is what was kind of shocking about it, it's when a game one thing that I will praise Kirby Smart for is his teams usually don't make mistakes, especially in crunch time, especially in big moments. And what that when they went for it, it was like they're on their own 33-yard line and they went for it and he was like, "Yeah, that was a mistake. He wasn't supposed to snap the ball." That doesn't usually happen with teams. I think that these two games kind of underline a bigger, I'm going to say, issue that we had this year in college football. Now, in no way, shape, or form am I blaming Gunnar Stockton for this loss. I think Gunnar Stockton played the best that he could, 18 for 31, 203 yards and a touchdown. He got blasted on one of those plays, and I think or one or two plays later, they score a touchdown. So, or he rushes in for a touchdown. But this was in my opinion, you kind of seen it with the Heisman. This was a down year for the out of this world quarterback. Usually we have that one quarterback where one or two quarterbacks that we look at and say, yeah, they're just leaps and bounds better than the rest. And while Fernando Mendoza was incredible and won the Heisman, shout out to him. I don't When you look at past Heisman winners and past years, this was a down year for quarterback play. Now what Trinidad Shabbat, he was great. Dante Moore was really good. Uh Oh, again, Fernando Mendoza was really good, but when you outside of that, yeah, Diego Pavia from Vanderbilt was cool, but that there's not many that you can really be like, oh, they had an incredible season. That's one of the that's one of the things that we saw with this Georgia game and with Ohio State. Miami's game plan, which was brilliant, was hey, we know that you have Jeremiah Smith. We know that you have one of the best running backs in the nation. We're gonna make Julian Sam beat us. I know that he can pass it, and in fact, most of those four, the reason why they were able to get 14 points mainly was because of Jeremiah Smith. But Ohio State, can Julian Sam beat us? Because we have questions. We we don't know, you know. And it turns out he wasn't. Gunnar Stockton, there were multiple times where there were passes that needed to be made. And again, I'm not blaming the loss on him. I'm just saying if they had more of a dynamic, you know what it is? He's probably the best quarterback that Georgia's ever had, but Stetson Bennett looked incredible. Well, obviously was incredible at Georgia. He even in college, while his NFL career didn't bloom as you would hope, uh he made big play after big play after big play in college almost routinely. Gunnar Stockton made a couple of them, but when they needed him the most, he wasn't able to do it. On top of the fact of you're talking about a Georgia team that doesn't usually make a Kirby Smart team that doesn't usually make mistakes. They made huge blunders that essentially cost them the game. And shout out to the Ole Miss Rebels. There was a bunch of times where you can look and say, "Oh well, the game's over." that last drive before the non face mask call, you would think, oh yeah, well there you go. Georgia gets the ball, they score, I think a field goal. Yeah, it's over with. You know, and the fact that they're doing this without their coaches or without a coach is crazy. That was by far the best game that we've seen in the quarterfinals these last 2 years. Shout out to Ole Miss for shocking us all, surprising the world, and making it to the semifinal, making it to the Fiesta Bowl. And they're going to go up against Miami, which is insane to think about. Who would have thought on the side that had Georgia, Ohio State, who would have thought that Miami and Ole Miss would be the two teams representing that side of the bracket or in the Fiesta Bowl, man. It's crazy. But shout out to those two. Hmm. So I'm an Oregon fan. We know this. And we know that Oregon played Texas Tech. And Oregon shut out Texas Tech 23-0. Now, this I believe a little bit was rest versus momentum. Oregon just dismantled what a week ago just dismantled JMU, and Texas Tech was at home chilling. So you have a game under your belt. You have a week of rest compared to 2 3 weeks, and you play. Oregon was the sharper team. Their defense was the better team. Texas Tech going into it was a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense. And they looked rusty. However, um there's a difference between looking rusty and being able to get back on track or get on track. That's sort of why there's two halves of football. But when you're playing a team that is just uber focused and and locked in, it's very difficult, and a lot of teams aren't able to do that. But let me talk about Texas Tech for a second. And it goes back to the same thing I said about Ohio State. Let's look at um let's look at Texas Tech's schedule. Right. I believe that's Arkansas Pine Bluff or Arizona or something. I think Arkansas Pine Bluff, maybe. You have Kent State, Oregon State, Utah, Houston, Kansas, Arizona State, Oklahoma, Kansas, BYU, UCF, West Virginia, and BYU again. If I'm not mistaken, BYU was without their quarterback. He got hurt. Uh, so they only played two teams that were ranked: Houston and BYU. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe both of those teams, right? Both of those teams lost in their no, Houston beat LSU and BYU, if I'm not mistaken, BYU might have got. Oh, they beat oh, yeah, both comebacks. Okay. Well, you played two teams. You played BYU and you played Utah. Not Houston, Utah. You played Utah, or the only two ranked teams that you played. Neither one of them made the playoffs. And when I look at this schedule, the only game that you lost was Arizona State. But if I'm not mistaken, Texas Tech quarterback was hurt. But outside of this, which one of these teams would prepare you for an Oregon defense? That was one of the best in the nation. Which one of these teams would prepare you for an Oregon offense that has Dante Moore in the rushing attack? That is the like. Which one of these teams can prepare you for that? That's one of the reasons why I was skeptical. I'm like, yo, hold on. I know what uh Morton is undefeated, who was the quarterback for Texas Tech. I know he's undefeated, but who has he played? Who have they played? You see, you can say the same thing a little bit about Oregon, right? Oregon played Montana State, Oklahoma State, Northwestern. They played Indiana, they lost. They played Iowa. They they ev- the only if you look at it, Penn State at the time was third, ranked third, but they're that you know. However, they played Indiana. They played a team that they're gonna have to play again. What in a week? But they played a team that made the cost. And as I know that they didn't have to play Ohio State this year, they didn't have to play Michigan this year, but Big Ten is much better if you talk about competition wise, much better than the Big 12. And I'm going to say this as a fan. If Oregon, I'll say that if Oregon beats Indiana, which I know, because we're going to talk about Indiana in a second, I know is a tall task. If Oregon beats Indiana, I don't see a path, especially if they play how they played against Texas Tech defensively, if they play offensively how they played against James Madison. If they can beat Indiana, I know Miami is the hottest. Miami's defense is probably the hottest unit right now, but I see a path. That's all I'm saying. I know I'm getting excited because I'm a fan. I see a path. Trust me, I know it's difficult with Indiana because we lost to them what 30-20 in the regular season. But if we can beat Indiana, I see a path. That means we're in the national championship against either Old Miss or Miami. But I think I don't think Texas Tech was as bad as getting shut out 23-0, but I do think that the combination of resting while Oregon played a game on top of the fact of you didn't really play anybody this year outside of BYU. You didn't really play anybody this year that would make you say, "Oh, okay, yeah, I know what the rankings say. I know what the stats say. I know they're one of the best offenses and best defenses in the nation." Yo, what's this dude's name? I'm about to give this man as much credit as I possibly can. What's Bailey, bro? Ben Roberts was going crazy too, but that's another thing. Texas Tech defense played incredible this game. I know that they gave up 23, but Texas Tech had what, four turnovers? So to have four turnovers, Oregon was in the red zone multiple times and only giving up 23 points was incredible. I need to shout him out though. Uh David, is it David? David Bailey, bro. David Bailey had nine solo tackles, one sack, and I don't know how many times he batted the ball down uh against like in clutch situations. Texas Tech, oh, and Rodriguez went crazy too. Texas Tech played great defensively. Their offense just couldn't do anything to save their life. Ben Roberts, Jacob Rodriguez, Bendon Johnson, and David Bailey. They were incredible for Oregon. I mean, for Texas Tech, their defense came to play. It was just their offense could not get any type of momentum. But we'll see. Now we'll see. But Oregon, you're almost there. You're almost there. Speaking of almost there, I think it's hmm. I thought that the rumblings for Kellen DeBoer's job was going to be silenced. I mean, even with all the struggles that they had, they beat Auburn. They went to the SEC championship and they essentially went to the college football playoffs. Now, yes, they did lose to Georgia by a lot in the in the SEC championship. But I said, that's tough. Georgia is tough playing them twice. You did beat Georgia earlier that year. It's tough beating Georgia twice. Maybe they'll fare better against Indiana. They're going to do that whole SEC is more dominant. SEC is a stronger conference than the Big Ten. That's where they're. I saw the path. That path was quickly shut. Indiana beat Alabama 38-3. Everything that I talked about, the whole rest versus momentum, this game is the outlier. Indiana completely dominated Alabama. Now you can say, well, Jay, Ty Simpson, he got hurt. Yo, when Ty Simpson got hurt, it was 24-0, if I'm not mistaken. I think, and you saw it, and you hear people talking about it. The biggest indictment I'll say in this game, when talking about Alabama, was how soft they look. Now, shout out to Indiana. They've been one of the better teams throughout the last 2 years, um, and they very well could win the national championship. But they completely dominated Alabama on both sides of the ball. It made it seem like Alabama should not even be on this field. That's how that's what it felt like very quickly. Oh, these both of these teams are in two completely different stratospheres. I don't. It made you question how in God's name did Alabama make it to the quarterfinal. You also could have said, "Well, damn, Indiana is just different." I will say, I was talking about the quarterbacks and everything, the best, what the Fernando Mendoza, while he didn't have the best numbers, he was the best player on this field. Him and the running back Black, he was Kellen Black, they were the two best players on this field, like by far. 15 carries, 99 yards, and a touchdown. Fernando Mendoza, 14 for 16, three touchdowns, 192 yards. Like I said, I thought that okay, well they made it to the noise around Kellen DeBoer will quiet down. They made it to the SEC championship. You know, they should be fine. No. No. The biggest indictment, not just that they lost, but how they looked. An SEC team, a team that is known for their physicality, that's known for their dominance. They essentially look like they were just getting tossed around. They look lifeless a lot of times. They just look it felt like they got punked. That is the biggest indictment on the Alabama game. They didn't look like they belonged on the field physically. Now I know that the program that Indiana has built that it's tough, but this is the great Alabama we're talking about. I'm not saying that Alabama should have won. If Alabama would have lost 31 to 38, that'd be different. But to get annihilated, to get pushed around the great University of Alabama, that is telling. And I'm not saying he's going to get fired or should get fired, uh, but I'd be shocked if I don't start hearing more of Kellen DeBoer has to go because we've seen Alabama lose under Nick Saban. We've never seen them get physically mauled like they did. We never seen them essentially quit physically before this game. Because don't get me wrong, Indiana is great. Indiana is a great team. We very well might be looking at the national champion. Like they are incredible. Fernando Mendoza won the Heisman. Where this team is incredible. They have arguably the best coach in college football that doesn't smile. This team is incredible. But when you get tossed around the field and physically outmatched, emotionally outmatched because it felt like they quit, that tells you all you need to know. That's different, you know. But we'll see, man. Congratulations to Indiana. Oh man, Oregon. That's I know it's hard to beat a team twice. That's all I'll say. It's hard to beat a team twice in one season. Ask ask Alabama or ask Georgia. Ask Alabama, you know. But because Georgia beat Ole Miss. And it's very I will say this, there is a good chance that we will see Indiana, this would be their first national championship. Oregon, this will be their first national championship if they win. Ole Miss, I think it's their first. Miami, I mean, they haven't won since what Jimmy Johnson was there. So talking about parity, you know what I mean? uh, but that was a very that was a great college football weekend, man. And I'm excited to see what happens January 8th, which is obviously the Fiesta Bowl. So, ooh, that Peach Bowl, Oregon, bro, I see it. You know how close Oregon has been so many times? Oregon's been in two national championships, lost both of them. I saw us lose. Now, granted, Cam Newton, in my opinion, is the greatest college football player we've ever seen, but I saw us lose a national championship to Cam Newton and Auburn. When that's when that Michael James and boy, and then I saw us lose to Ezekiel Elliott in the national championship, and I think Cordero Patterson. Mm, they got a shot. Speaking of shot, let's talk about a very important week 18, the final week of the NFL season. We have essentially two games, two winner get in scenarios. One we're going to see on Saturday or today, wherever you're listening to it, and one that we're going to see on Thursday Night Football. Let me give my predictions on the all the games, but obviously we'll talk about two a little bit more length than others. And the first one is Carolina at Tampa Bay. That's at 4:30 on Saturday. I'm recording this Friday evening, so you'll get this tomorrow. Carolina is in a place they have not been since Cam Newton, ironically. Uh, this is going to sound harsh, but it's true. Carolina has not been relevant since Cam Newton. Yeah, they had a couple of singular uh, Christian McCaffrey days, They had Sam Darnold on the team, but he didn't play well there. They had a very brief stint with Baker Mayfield, but overall, Carolina hasn't really been relevant since Cam Newton. And when I mean relevant, they haven't been in let's even say playoff conversation since Cam Newton. So this is a new-ish territory that they're in. And you heard Cam Newton say it, you heard Luke Kuechly say it, you heard a lot of former Panthers say it. It's a different feeling when the Panthers are relevant. Or at least I don't think anybody and their mama thinks that Carolina can win a Super Bowl, but at least to make the playoffs. Nobody thought that going into this year, and even at times this year. But they found a way to get in a win or go home situation against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I also want to explain to you and want to reiterate just how different we're looking at both the Carolina Panthers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers right now. Because remember, earlier this year, Tampa was one of the best teams in football. I even said that they're a dark horse to win the Super Bowl. Baker Mayfield was playing at an MVP level. Their defense was playing at a great level. They were great. And as we started to see, injuries started to take a major hit. Just it felt like week after week after week, a key player got hurt. From Mike Evans, Chris Godwin took a while to come back. Bucky Irving, Rasheed Wright. It was just it was just a landslide of injuries. And we also saw, and a lot of people knew this. As great as Baker Mayfield is, he is not a mistake-free type person. He's not a mistake-free type player. You have to live with some of the mistakes that he's ultimately going to make. And when you couple that with not having, his safety blankets, losing tight end, losing Mike Evans, you're going to see a lot. You're going to see him come down to earth a lot more. So the person that was an MVP favorite at one time this season now looks like a shell of himself just a few weeks ago. There's a lot more positive momentum right now with the Carolina Panthers than there is with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think the question is, and the question that I have to ask myself is, who do I trust? Do I trust Bryce Young and this team that has played incredible at times, but then played terrible at others, or the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where they played incredible majority of the year, but injuries started creeping up, and then now they're in this position. I think the defense for the Carolina Panthers is a very underrated unit. When they're playing to the best of their ability, Carolina has a pretty good defense. And at this point of the season, I think their defense might be when they're playing up to snuff. I think their defense might be a little better than Tampa's right now because Tampa's defense is still also dealing with a bunch of injuries. I'm going to go with the Carolina Panthers. I know the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are at home, but I'm going to go with Tampa Bay. I mean, I'm going to go with the Carolina Panthers. I just feel like they're playing better, even though it's the Carolina Panthers, man. And for a while, it's been really tough to hang your hat on that. I'm going to go with Carolina. Now you have the battle for the number one seed. You have Seattle at San Francisco. San Francisco. I don't think enough credit has been given to this team for what they've been able to overcome this year. The fact that There was a good portion of the year where Mac Jones was playing because Brock Purdy had turf toe, I believe, or he had either turf toe or shoulder injury, one of them two. Um, the fact of Brandon Ayuk has been a no show all season. Juwan Jennings was out. They lost Fred Warner. They lost Nick Bosa. George Kittle was in and out. Christian McCaffrey missed time. The injury bug hit this team like a Mack truck. And even in that, they are a game away from securing the number one spot. If there was any year for Kyle Shanahan to win the coach of the year, this would be the year. Because nobody thought that Carolina should be this good. Not Carolina, that San Francisco should be this good, especially when you see the injuries that they've sustained. There's a lot of people that are now saying that Brock Purdy is a top 10 quarterback in the league. And when you look at Seattle, this game is uber important, not just for them, because you can go from like the number one overall or the number one seed in the NFC to like the fifth seed or something. Sam Darnold needs this game. As much as Sam Darnold has kind of rebuilt his reputation when we talk about, his play, one thing that he has not uh, silenced, I guess, is the criticism of, okay, when Sam Darnold, when it matters the most, he does not play well. We saw that last year. I think what the Vikings won 14 games last year. But when you get, a game before the playoffs and then you get to the playoffs and you have your two worst games of the season and you lose both of them, you go from the number one seed to having an away game. I think it was against the Rams, and you lost. Sam Darnold needs this game desperately for his reputation, and just for, again, is do you want to be hosting a playoff series or do you want to be on the road? For that, I think I'm gonna go with Seattle. Right now, they're both playing great. They're both playing some of their best football, even though the offense for Seattle hasn't been good the last maybe 3 weeks, even with Jackson Smith and Jigba and all them. But number one seed is up for grabs. I'm going to go with Seattle, even though I think right now San Francisco is playing like the better team. But we'll see. And then you got Sunday, New Orleans at Atlanta. Atlanta frustrates me because when you look at them play, especially against the Rams, well, on Monday Night Football, this team is much better than the record. This team should be competing for a playoff spot, and they're over here, yeah. I'm gonna go with Atlanta, even though Tyler Shaw and the New Orleans Saints have been much better than I thought they were going to be this year. I'm gonna go with Atlanta. Cleveland at Cincinnati. I'm going to go with the Bengals. However, I do want to see Myles Garrett break that sack record. I think he's a sack away or a half or a sack and a half away. You're going up, you weren't able to get it done against the Steelers. You're going up against one of the worst offensive lines in football. I want to see Myles Garrett break that sack record. I really do. But overall, I think that Cincinnati is going to win the game. Green Bay at Minnesota. If I'm not mistaken, I think both of these teams, well, I think Green Bay is going to rest most of their players. So I'm probably going to go with Minnesota, but who knows? At Dallas, at New York, I don't know why either one of these teams. Well, New York pretty much fumbled the number one overall pick yet again for the second year in a row. But I'm going to go with Dallas. I think they said Dak Prescott's going to play, so I'm going to go with Dallas. Tennessee at Jacksonville. Jacksonville quietly could lock up the number. They could get the number one overall seed in the AFC. I'm gonna go with Jacksonville. Tennessee is just not that good of a team. Indianapolis at Houston. Looks like Phillip Rivers retired again. Shout out to Phillip Rivers. I'm gonna go with Houston though. Houston's just a better team. Jets at Buffalo. I think Buffalo is gonna rest everyone, but even still, it's New York. The Jets, they're not good. Detroit at Chicago. Quiet as is kept, and an underlying story for this game. I think Caleb Williams is like 270 yards away from being the first in franchise history, the first 400 yard or 4,000 yard passer on a season. He's like 270 yards away. I mean, and you're going up against the Detroit Lions defense is not that good. I'm gonna need you to do it. I want to see when you're on the cusp of history. I want to see it. Uh, I'm gonna go with Chicago, and I want Caleb. I don't even care if you get to 270 and then sit him down. Like get that record, man. That's why I was so upset. Well, last year when Saquon didn't get the record, now you see what he's looking like this year. Like it is what it is. Chargers at Denver, sneaky big game. I'm gonna go with Denver. Chargers, they're good, but I think Denver's defense is gonna be, even though Denver's offense ain't that good. Kansas City at Vegas. I think that this is gonna be Travis Kelsey's last game, and because I think the team probably internally knows that, and I think they're gonna play hard for him, and I think they're gonna win the game because Vegas, they're actively tanking. So Arizona at Rams. I think the Rams are going to destroy Arizona because I think last or Monday, Matthew Stafford may have lost the Heisman. I mean, not Heisman, may have lost the MVP to Drake May. I think they're going to do everything in their power to get him back that MVP. He might throw for 5 touchdowns. We'll see. But I got the Rams. Miami at New England. I think Mike Vrabel is going to do the same thing for Drake May. He's going to let him play maybe a half or 3 quarters and get like 4 or 5 touchdowns and maybe seal the MVP. Who knows? But I think right now it's a two-person race, and we'll see. Washington at Philadelphia. I think Philadelphia is sitting everyone, if I'm not mistaken. So Washington gets the win. Then, then you get to Monday or Sunday night football. You get winner takes all, Baltimore at Pittsburgh. And this is essentially you get Lamar Jackson back. And we talked about, I think last episode, all the chatter, the interview or the column about Lamar. This is what you look, we've heard all throughout the season, or we've heard all this week, yo, Baltimore's going to get in. Baltimore's going to get in. Baltimore's going to make a run. This is what you got to do. You got to go up against your rival, a team that you lost to this year. I think Baltimore is going to win. Um, I think not. Pittsburgh not having DK is huge. We saw that against the Browns. But quiet as it's kept, there's been a lot. There's the the defense that was quote unquote vaunted. They've kind of come back to life. They haven't been great. Uh, and I am so nervous about, are they going to revert to the same crap that they look. I don't care if Lamar Jackson or Tyler Huntley's back there. Derrick Henry should get the ball 20, 25 times. I think that what they do, what Todd Monken does is he's like, oh, we got Lamar and he has to throw the ball. No, he does not. Let Derrick Henry just toss it and figure it out, man. You have the 22 personnel. Patrick Ricard, Isaiah Likely, let them be blockers. Just give the ball to Derrick Henry. And then Lamar Jackson can carve them up. Once that they start loading the box, that's when you get Zay Fly. Like, come on, man. I think Baltimore is the better team, even though that they have put themselves in this situation. And it was very interesting and hearing the discord. 100% Tyler Huntley is better than a 70% Lamar Jackson. In what world? Like, are we talking about the two-time MVP Lamar? Should have been three. Like, yeah, I'm gonna go with Baltimore. I think Pittsburgh. We don't know what's gonna happen. We don't know if T.J. Watt's gonna play. They said that's up in the air, and we know DK Metcalf's not gonna play. So I'm gonna go with Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. Because Lamar Jackson was a full participant, even if he's not 100%, bro. You can do the same thing Tyler Huntley did. Give the ball to Derrick Henry, bro. What do you aren't you reserving him for this time of the year? Yeah. Those are my picks. Those are my picks for week 18, and we'll see. Lastly, before we go, I want to have a basketball discussion really quick. Um Nikola Jokic avoids major injury, and I think he got hurt. He has a knee injury or hyperextended knee or something like that. He's going to be out for about 4 weeks. And obviously, that's the best case scenario because it could have been ACL. And this is yet another year that we're having this conversation. Look, I understand why the rule was implemented. The rule of which I'm talking about is there is a game threshold that you need to play in order to be considered for an award, in order to be considered for the MVP, the defensive player of the year, those type of end of season awards. And this is going to be yet another year where the award is going to be awards, not just one award. The awards are going to be affected by injury. Because what a couple years ago, it was Joel Embiid was the clear cut MVP of the league until he got hurt. And he did not reach that game threshold, and they gave it to somebody else. If I'm not mistaken, they gave it to Nikola Jokic. And rightfully so. Nikola Jokic had a great season too, but before he got hurt, Joel Embiid was the clear cut MVP. At this very moment, especially when you look at what he just did on Christmas. At this very moment, there is not a player in the league, and there's been some great performances. There've been some great players. There is not a player in the league that is close to as good as Nikola Jokic is. Just look at what he did on Christmas. Nikola Jokic is the best player, and he easily is the front runner for the MVP right now. But with him getting hurt, and missing, I think he's going to say he's going to be evaluated in 4 weeks. I think he's going to be under the threshold. Like he's not going to be able to win the MVP. Again, I understand why the rule was implemented to stop and prevent rest and load management. But when you're talking about players that are actually hurt, that I think that's kind of crazy. You know, it's and again, I'm happy that it's not the ACL. I wish for a speedy recovery, but we're losing the best player in the world. And the thing about it that I believe is going to happen is when he comes back, he's going to be on yet another tear. And there's a good chance that the Denver Nuggets could win this year's championship with how he's playing. And Jamal Murray's playing well. Aaron Gordon, it's there could be a chance that they win. But because he doesn't play 65 games, he's not eligible. Like that's crazy to think about. Again, I'm not bashing why the rule is there, but the rule should have some type of exception for situations like this. And I know that I'm pretty much talking to myself because this is not the first year. Again, this is the second or third. Hell, defensive player of the year was affected last year for that. If I'm not mistaken, the rookie of the year was affected. What's his name? There's a reason, and no offense to him, there's a reason why Victor Wembanyama didn't win Defensive Player of the Year last year. He was the clear cut Defensive Player of the Year until he got hurt. Stephon Castle winning Rookie of the Year, stuff like that. It's crazy, man. But I do wish for a speedy recovery, and I'm glad that he avoided major injury. That is Nikola Jokic. So, and there you have it. That's been today's episode of the Unpopular Podcast. I truly, truly appreciate you guys. If you want a Popular Podcast shirt, hoodie, sweater, long sleeve joggers, the links in the description below. I have multiple different colors, multiple different designs. Get your Unpopular Podcast merch today. Also, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm trying to get as many subscribers as possible. If you like the content, tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend to subscribe. It definitely means a lot. Also, for my DSPs, there's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, wherever you get your podcast, wherever you get your DSPs, and you want to hear my luscious voice, please follow, please subscribe, please share, comment, rate it all. I'm trying to grow the podcast unilaterally, and I cannot do it without you guys. So please, please, please continue to support. Also for the socials, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. I post pretty much daily, whether it's reels, stories. If you want to go back and forth, debate, just keep it respectful. And I don't mind going back and forth in the comments. It just means that you're listening to me and that you have an opinion. Both I truly appreciate. So, yeah, keep it respectful. Don't mind going back and forth. And again, I want to say Happy New Year to all you guys. And I hope that this year is 10 times better than whatever last year brought you. Until next time, much love.